It's no surprise that when Far Cry 6 previews released, we'd see a little bit of controversy because when the narrative director at Ubisoft said the game wasn't made to make a political statement, journalists from Kotaku, PC Gamer, even IGN all blew up because they said it was ridiculous. They wouldn't take this opportunity to make bold political statements. And hilariously, Kotaku wasn't invited to this preview event and they released a massive hit piece against the game and also other journalists because they're furious they weren't invited to play the game early. So I mainly want to read this Kotaku article. But before we get into the topic at hand, if you enjoy the content that I create, please make sure to subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell. Follow me on social media like Twitter or mine so that you can see when my content is posted. And if you do really enjoy the videos and the live streams that I create, please consider becoming a Dark Titan via Patreon for just $1 a month or supporting via direct donations. All of the links are in the description, and of course, I do really appreciate all of the support. So the Kotaku article is titled, "If you're going to preview Far Cry 6, at least do it right." So, it says Far Cry 6 is still over a month out from release, and while there remains plenty we don't know yet, a massive batch of hands-on previews dropped this week across various gaming outlets and influencer videos, shedding more light on the game. The problem is what they illuminate and what they don't. They paint Far Cry 6 as the latest predictable blockbuster, albeit one with aspirations of saying something meaningful about revolution and the oppression that spurs it. Sound familiar? The previews just seem to be there to tell us whether the shooting is any good and what novel ways Ubisoft has found to dress up its to-do list icon-filled maps rather than to interrogate why we should expect anything more from Far Cry this time around. They are literally complaining that game journalists are doing what they're supposed to do, which is tell us about a game, the mechanics of a game, how it plays, if it's smooth or not. They are complaining that people are not, filling their articles with information about the story and about the narrative it's supposed to spread. They literally say right here, the previews just seem to tell us whether the shooting is any good and what Ubisoft has done to the maps. Yeah, that's the point of all of these preview events, is to show off gameplay, to talk about the gameplay. Most people are playing a game to have fun with it and for the gameplay itself. It says, "Not your granddad's revolution," quipped IGN. Far Cry 6 is a huge game in every sense, announced VG 24/7. It looks to be a big, beautiful game, concluded VentureBeat. They didn't have the opportunity to play this themselves and give their own thoughts, so they literally have to fill this article to the brim with extra quotes from other video game websites like IGN, VG 24/7, and VentureBeat. I think that's truly hilarious. It says even the previews that acknowledge the series' troubled thematic past remained optimistic it might not get in the way this time around. Hopefully, the enjoyment we get from flying around in our wingsuits, firing the over-the-top weapons, and fighting alongside a cute wiener dog named Chorizo doesn't contrast too harshly with the story of an island in political peril, wrote Game Informer. Now, obviously, the game is about a fascist dictator with control over the fictional island they made for the game, so clearly it's got political themes, but Kotaku is mad that they didn't take this opportunity to make statements about things that are going on in the real world, like the protests against the Cuban government and the ruling Communist Party of Cuba. They are furious that Ubisoft didn't take this opportunity to do more and make more political statements. It says, "What I've learned from previews like these and others," Kotaku was not invited to these demos, "is that Far Cry 6 will let you force helicopters to land so you can steal them rather than just blowing them up. The series' skill tree has been replaced with a loot-based system where stats and abilities are activated by equipping new guns and armor. Chickens, alligators, and other murderous amigos will even fight by your side while you're torching island compounds with DIY flamethrowers. flamethrowers. These are things that are very important to the game and the gameplay itself. Yeah, that's what preview events are for. Obviously, preview events could talk a little bit about the story, but it's not like they're playing the whole entire game. It says, what I've heard much less about, if anything at all, is what Far Cry 6 does to prevent itself from feeling like another gory vacation to a country created by Canadian studios under the umbrella of a French company. Maybe that's by design. Narrative payoffs are an easy thing to hide from preview demos under the auspices of not spoiling anything. Maybe it's because at its core, Far Cry 6 remains fundamentally a game about finding cool and chaotic new ways to blow shit up. These underlying tensions should be at the heart of deciding what Far Cry 6 might be and whether it is worth engaging with. They are already trashing this game when they haven't even played it. They are not going to give this game a fair shot. When Kotaku's review of this game comes out, it's probably going to be a monstrosity. They are probably going to pound this game into the ground. They are not going to give it a fair chance. We don't know really what the story's fully gonna entail. Yes, we've seen some previews, we've heard the generic details of the story, but they're not even going to give it a chance. They're not even going to wait to play it themselves. They're already saying, oh, this is probably just gonna be another Far Cry game that just lacks a lot. These hacks wouldn't make it in any other industry. This is what they do when they're upset. They throw a hissy fit and post it on their websites, expecting people to side with them, which is pretty freaking pathetic. This is why people call Kotaku a joke. This is why no one takes them seriously anymore, because this is the best content they could come up with, is trashing journalists and a game that they haven't even played yet. So scrolling down, it says Far Cry 6 made waves back in May when the narrative director said the game was not intended to make a political statement about Cuba, which a lot of people did praise. It says, meanwhile, some writers who might have been able to provide alternative perspectives were shut out of the process. I was kindly invited to cover that build for an outlet to offer a Latinx perspective, and Ubisoft declined it since I'm not based in the US. According to what a Ubisoft rep told this person, that was because of concerns over server ping times since the Far Cry 6 demo would run over parsec. Bad ping would mean a laggy demo experience, and the feel of the gameplay was the priority, it seems, rather than the story and its political trappings. I don't know why Kotaku doesn't understand the point of a game is the gameplay, but yeah, it just sounds like Ubisoft wanted people this time around to focus on the gameplay, to get a feel for the game, some of the new systems in it, and we'll all get the chance to see what the narrative and the story itself is going to be when the game comes out. All of these review outlets are going to get the chance to post their reviews a couple of days early for people, so what does it matter right now if they wanted the experience to be based on gameplay? Even with Far Cry 5, these hacks were whining about how it wasn't political enough. They said that Ubisoft should have added a bite to the game and tackled real issues, and one of the lead developers back then said they weren't planning to put massive statements into the game that reflected issues going on in the real world, and I wanted to bring up one of the many articles. It says Far Cry 5 is apolitical to the point of absurdity. It says Far Cry 5 is out today, and it's time to revisit something I said back in May when the setting and concept of the game was first announced. Bold prediction, Far Cry 5 won't have much useful social commentary in any direction, and will be mostly just shooting bearded guys. That's the point of games, is to have fun, shoot people sometimes, or maybe figure out puzzles, or solve a mystery. That's the point of a video game. Video games don't always have to make a social commentary. It says I may be wrong about a lot of things, but this one certainly panned out. And then they go on to complain about the things that the game didn't do, in their opinion, properly, like race and gender, guns, the opioid epidemic, the government. They said don't expect any commentary on guns or gun ownership in a game that is built entirely around them. Is it a good idea that a cult can militarize itself to the point of ridiculousness thanks to weapon availability in America? Who knows? We, the resistance, have guns too, so we can shoot better than the cult and are able to win the war. Conversely, on the other side of the political spectrum, you could make the argument that this is why we need so many guns, in case our land and lives are threatened by invaders. Then they talk about race and gender. You might think that a religious cult in rural Montana might be forced to address issues of race or gender, but simply put, neither exist in the world of Far Cry. They also talk about things like the opioid epidemic. There's a plot thread running through Far Cry 5 about bliss, a type of addictive hallucinogenic that binds people to the will of the Seed family and their cult. It's a made-up drug, but you could really easily see how it could have been a stand-in for the very real opioids that decimate rural areas in America like this. And yet, how does the game treat the drug? It creates brain-dead melee troops that sprint after you and can only die via headshots. Then we've got the government. So again, I'm not even saying that everything the game deals with would have to be some progressive statement. You probably could have made an interesting game about government overreach that leads to the creation of splintered militia like this, yet the game doesn't really dive into these issues outside of a few wacky side characters. So as you can see, even with Far Cry 5, these same journalists were furious with the fact that they didn't make enough political statements in the game, and I think that a lot of these journalists from Kotaku and IGN are going to continue to attack Far Cry 6 if it's not exactly the way that they want, because they think that every developer should have a political narrative behind their work, which is absolutely ridiculous. But let everyone know your thoughts in the comments section down below. If you enjoyed this video, please make sure to give it a like, share it, and subscribe to the channel. And of course, if you didn't, make sure to give it a dislike. I appreciate your support either way. But I will talk to you all again in the next video really soon.